Hey, everyone. I never imagined I'd be the kind of person to share personal stuff online, but here I am. There's something important I want to say, something I hope might help some of you avoid the mistakes I made. This isn't a made-up story for your entertainment. This is my life, my reality. And honestly, it's not pretty. But if sharing it can stop even one person from being as blind as I was, then it'll be worth it. So let me start with a quick introduction. Hi, I'm the guy whose whole life got turned upside down because of a stupid joke. Yeah, you heard me right, a joke. A joke that exposed the fact that my wife, the woman I thought I'd grow old with, had been cheating on me. But before I dive into all of that mess, let me give you a little context. You need to understand the full picture to really get how badly I was played. I'm in my early 40s with dark hair that's starting to show some gray. Thanks, life. I'm no model, but I'm in decent shape. I take care of myself. I've got a good enough job. I'm a project manager at a mid-sized firm. We're not rolling in cash, but we've never had to worry about bills. I always thought I was doing all right, providing for my family, keeping things steady. But man, I had no idea what was going on under the surface. Now, let's talk about her for a second. We met about 13 years ago, and when I first saw her, I was blown away. She's tall, blonde, and has these sharp, striking features. Sophia is the kind of woman who gets noticed the moment she walks into a room. And trust me, I wasn't immune to that. I fell hard. I thought I'd hit the jackpot. She had this energy about her, always aiming higher, always looking for something bigger, better. I liked it about her at first. She pushed me to be better. It felt like we were building something together. But as time went on, it became clearer that bigger and better didn't include us. It was all about her. More attention, more compliments, more things. Expensive things, too. Designer bags, new phones, jewelry. I'd get her some of those things when I could, but honestly, I could never keep up with her demands. Sophia didn't work for the first few years of our marriage. She stayed home with our son while I was out working hard to make ends meet. But once he started school, she took a job at a high-end gym as a personal trainer. It seemed harmless enough at first. I was just happy she had something to focus on, other than spending money and complaining that I didn't have enough time for her. Now about our son. He's 8 now, and let me tell you, I love that kid more than anything in this world. He's got red hair, which, here's the thing, that's what kicked off this whole mess. See, I got dark hair, Sophia's got blonde, and our son, he's got this fiery red hair that doesn't look like it came from either of us. Sure, I know how genetics work, but it became a running joke between us. I'd make playful comments about how our son's red hair didn't really match either of ours. Just harmless jokes like asking if maybe the mailman had something to explain. Emma would usually laugh or roll her eyes, but this time, her reaction was different. But this one time at dinner, I dropped the usual joke. Maybe I should have a word with the neighbor about our redhead, I said, half laughing as I shoveled food in my mouth. It was supposed to be one of those harmless, tired jokes, something I'd said a million times. But this time, Sophia's reaction was different. She didn't laugh. She didn't roll her eyes. No, she froze. For just a second, but it was enough. Her smile dropped, just for a blink, before she quickly forced it back up. It was like someone hit the pause button on her face. That look stayed with me. It felt like I hit a nerve, but I had no idea why. I tried to shake it off, but over the next few days, I started noticing more little things. Tiny things, really, that I wouldn't have thought twice about if I wasn't already suspicious. Like how her phone was always glued to her side now. Sure, we all have our phones, but Sophia used to leave hers lying around. Now, it was either in her hand, her pocket, or face down on the table. And when it buzzed, she'd grab it like it was a ticking time bomb. At first, I thought I was just being paranoid. Work was stressful, and I hadn't been home as much as I should have. Late nights, early mornings. I was working my ass off to keep everything going. Sophia always complained about how much I worked, but in my mind, I was doing it all for us, for her and our son. I figured the distance between us was just because of my job. But looking back, maybe I should have noticed the signs earlier. Then there were the girls' nights. They weren't new. Sophia's always had a group of friends she'd go out with every now and then. But they started happening more often, and she'd come home later and later, sometimes way too drunk for what was supposed to be a casual night out. I'd ask her how it went, and she'd brush it off like it was nothing. Just the usual. She'd throw out a name or two of people I didn't know. I didn't push it. Why would I? She was an adult, and I trusted her. Or at least I thought I did. See, here's the thing about trust. Once you get even the slightest reason to doubt it, it all starts to unravel. You start playing detective in your own head. I'd lay in bed at night, replaying that damn look on her face when I made the joke about our son's red hair. Was there something more to it? Was she hiding something? Or was I just being a jealous, insecure idiot? Now, you're probably wondering about my friends, Max, Luke, and Ethan. We've been friends for years, ever since college. The guys, Max, Luke, and Ethan, have always had my back, no questions asked. Every couple of weeks, we'd make a break for it, get away for a few days just to take a breather from everything. Whether it was fishing, hiking, or renting some cabin out in the middle of nowhere, those trips were our time to relax, do some guy stuff, and forget the world for a while. Did Sophia hate those trips? Every single time I'd pack my bag, she'd give me that look like I was walking out on her. "You're going off again?" she'd say. "What about me? What about us?" And I get it. Maybe I was being selfish. Maybe I should have stayed home more often. But those trips? They were my escape. My way of hitting the reset button. They kept me from losing it. Work was always stressful, and things at home were no easier. So yeah, I needed that space. And it wasn't like I was gone every weekend, just a couple of days every other week. I thought it was harmless. But while I was off recharging, Sophia was back at home doing, well, whatever she was doing. I had no clue at the time, but she wasn't just hanging around waiting for me. Now, I've always had a dark sense of humor. It's gotten me into trouble more than once, but it's also been my defense mechanism, helping me deal with tense situations. I didn't realize it then, but it was about to become the reason my whole life fell apart. After that weird moment at dinner, when Sophia froze after my joke about our son, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. It was like a nagging thought I couldn't ignore. I wasn't sure if I was just being paranoid or if something was really off, but it made me start thinking about cheating, trust, and all that stuff I never thought I'd have to worry about. One night, I was trying to unwind, scrolling through YouTube, when I came across this prank video. It was a guy pretending to confess that he'd been cheating on his wife. He casually drops the bomb, records her reaction, and of course, she flips out screaming, throwing things, the whole bit. The whole thing was a joke, a way to get a rise out of her. And by the end, they were both laughing about it. I couldn't stop watching it. It was ridiculous, but it stuck with me. And that's when my brain did its usual thing and went off the rails. I thought, what if I did something like that with Sophia? She'd always been a little jealous. Not of my friends, but of these imaginary women she thought I was seeing every time I went out with the guys. Every time I'd come home from one of those trips, Sophia would hit me with the same questions. Where do you really go? Who are you really with? It was exhausting. I'd try to reassure her, but it never seemed to matter. The thing is, I never gave her any reason to doubt me. I've never been the cheating type, but in her mind, every time I wasn't by her side, I was off with someone else. So, in my twisted little way, I figured, why not prank her? Let her feel what it's like when the shoe's on the other foot. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. One night, after a few drinks with Max and Luke, I came home a little buzzed but still holding it together. Sophia was already in one of her moods, making passive-aggressive comments about how I was probably out with other women again. Normally, I'd brush it off, or we'd argue. But this time, with the alcohol in my system and that stupid prank video stuck in my head, I decided to go through with it. I was going to give her the best fake confession she'd ever heard. I set up my phone quietly, making sure it was in the perfect spot to catch everything, and turned to her, putting on my best serious face. I tried to make it believable, like I was about to confess the worst thing I'd ever done. "Sophia," I said, trying to sound all heavy, like I was carrying the weight of the world. "I need to tell you something. I've been cheating on you." I got to admit, I was feeling pretty proud of myself. I was laying it on thick, really selling it. I expected her to freak out, maybe throw a dish, or yell, or get all dramatic like the wife in the video. But no, she didn't do any of that. She just stared at me. No surprise, no shock. Just this look I couldn't quite read. I remember thinking, what the hell is going on? Then she dropped it. "Well," she said, folding her arms, "I've been cheating on you too." At first I laughed. I thought she was just playing along, trying to beat me in my own game. "Oh really? With who?" I asked, cracking a joke. But she didn't smile, didn't even blink. "Yeah," she said, dead serious. "With both of them." That's when everything went dizzy. And it wasn't just the alcohol. My laughter caught in my throat. "Wait, what?" I said, feeling like the ground was falling out from under me. "You're serious, right?" She didn't even flinch. "I'm serious," she said. "I've been sleeping with both of them for months." I thought I must have still been drunk, that maybe I was hearing things wrong. But no, the truth hit me like a ton of bricks. I didn't know what to say, what to do. My heart was pounding, and my mind was spinning. I just sat there, staring at her, waiting for her to tell me it was all a joke, just like I'd been trying to do to her. But there was no punchline, no twist, just cold, hard reality. But the punchline never came. I don't remember much after that moment. The conversation just turned into a blur of shouting, accusations, and words I'm sure I'll never fully recall. The only thing that sticks in my mind is stumbling out of the house at some point, sitting on the doorstep with my hands on my head, feeling like the whole world was falling apart because of a stupid prank. That little game I thought would be funny had backfired in a way I couldn't have imagined. It wasn't a joke anymore. It was my life unraveling. Everything I thought I knew about my world was crumbling right before my eyes. Filing for divorce was the easy part. That was cold and personal. And I'll admit, it gave me a strange sense of satisfaction, knowing that I was finally cutting ties with Sophia. But after the papers were filed, the questions started gnawing at me. It wasn't enough to just walk away. I needed something more, some kind of closure, maybe, or some twisted sense of justice. And I knew exactly where to start. Max. Sophia's betrayal hurt. There's no doubt about that. But Max? That was a different kind of pain. He wasn't just a guy I hung out with. He was my friend, a friend I trusted, someone who'd been there for me through the big moments in my life. My wedding, the birth of my son, and all those times I thought everything was solid. And now I knew he'd been betraying me in the worst way possible, behind my back with my wife. The more I thought about it, the more it consumed me. I couldn't just let it slide. I wasn't the kind of guy who would just sit there and take it. I wanted revenge, plain and simple. Ethan was the first person I went to when I decided to take action. Out of all of us, Ethan was always the level-headed one. The guy who could think things through when the rest of us were just reacting. He hadn't been involved in any of the mess with Sophia, so I knew I could count on him. After a long night of venting and drinking, I spilled everything to Ethan about Sophia, about Max, Luke, and the prank gone wrong. All of it. Ethan was furious for me. And when I told him I needed to make Max pay, he didn't try to talk me out of it. Instead, he asked, "What do you want to do?" That's when the plan started coming together. Max had a lot to lose, not just his friendship with me, but his whole life. He had a good job, a wife, 2 kids. A picture-perfect life on the surface, while he was secretly screwing around with my wife. I wasn't just going to ruin his friendship with me. I was going to destroy the image he'd built, the one he was so proud of, the one he tried to sell to the world. I was going to show him what it felt like to be betrayed. The first step was simple: gather evidence. Sophia had deleted most of her messages, but Ethan had a friend who was a tech genius. He was able to recover some of the deleted texts. What we found was more than enough: explicit texts, photos, plans for meetups. Max wasn't just a casual fling for Sophia. They'd been at it for months, maybe longer. Seeing it all in black and white was like pouring salt on a fresh wound. But it also lit a fire inside me. Now, with the evidence in hand, I had to figure out the best way to strike back. It wasn't just about exposing the affair. It was about hitting Max where it would hurt the most: his reputation, his family. That's where Ethan came in. He knew Max's wife well, had been friends with her through different gatherings and events. She was a good woman, didn't deserve to be left in the dark about her husband. But we had to be careful. This couldn't be some out-of-control, emotional outburst that would blow up in our faces. We needed to be smart, calculated. So Ethan and I arranged a casual get-together. Nothing too fancy, just a weekend barbecue. The kind of thing our group did every once in a while. Max and his family showed up, smiling, laughing, completely unaware of what was coming. I watched them, and with every laugh, every loving look his wife gave him, it made my blood boil. I wanted to rush over and punch him right then and there, but I kept my cool. I had a bigger plan. After a few drinks, Ethan and I managed to slip away with Max's wife. Let's call her Lily, for a private chat. We were subtle about it, not wanting to draw attention. I could see the confusion in her eyes when we asked her to talk, but she came along without questioning us too much. Once we were far enough from the others, I pulled out my phone and showed her everything, texts, photos, the whole thing. At first, she didn't believe it. She stared at the screen, her face pale, her eyes blinking like she couldn't process what she was seeing. "This can't be real," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Max would never." But it was real. And Ethan, bless him, was there to back me up. He confirmed everything, even offered to let her talk to his tech friend if she needed proof. We gave her space to process it all, but the devastation was clear on her face. She was a good person, didn't deserve this any more than I did. But I needed her to know the truth. I needed her to understand the kind of man she was married to. Lily didn't cry or scream, though. She was stronger than I thought she'd be. She just stood there, staring at the ground for what felt like hours. Then she looked up at me and said, "What do we do now?" That's when I told her the rest of the plan. We weren't just going to confront Max. That would have been too easy. I wanted him to feel cornered, trapped. Lily agreed to play along, and we set the trap for the following weekend. Another gathering, but this time, the setting was Max's turf. The moment arrived, and I could hardly keep my composure. Max was completely oblivious to the storm about to hit him, and seeing him act all relaxed, chatting with me like nothing had changed, made me feel sick to my stomach. We let the day go on, pretending everything was fine, but I knew the clock was ticking, and it wasn't long before the moment we'd been waiting for arrived. Lily pulled him aside, just as Ethan and I had done with her. And just like that, the confrontation began. I could only imagine how loud the argument must have been, probably loud enough for the whole neighborhood to hear. Max tried to deny everything at first, but when Lily showed him the evidence, there was no room left for excuses. And that's when I made my move. I stepped into the room just as Lily delivered the knockout punch. "Jack showed me everything," she said, her voice colder than I'd ever heard it. Max turned to me with shock written all over his face, his eyes wide, his mouth slightly agape. I could see the fear in his eyes, the realization that the safe little world he'd been living in was collapsing before him. That look on his face, that's what I had been waiting for. I had finally gotten the revenge I needed. His eyes mirrored the shock and pain I'd felt, and for the first time, I allowed myself to savor it. There was no need to say anything. He already knew what was happening. The damage was done, and I just stood there, letting him stew in his misery, silently letting him understand that his entire life was falling apart because of what he had done. And I wasn't finished yet. Far from it. Max had been easy. His family, his reputation, those were his weak points. It didn't take much to tear it all down. But Luke was a different animal altogether. The guy didn't have a family, didn't have any real connections that mattered. His life was all about his career, his money, his constant bragging about the latest investments, the next big thing. Money was his one weakness. If there was anything Luke cared about more than himself, it was his growing bank account. And that's where I knew I could hit him hardest. After the fallout with Max, I didn't waste time on Luke. The fury that had been smoldering inside me for months was now an uncontrollable blaze. And I was done holding back. It was personal now, but I needed to be strategic. I couldn't just go at Luke the way I had with Max. He wouldn't react the same way. No, Luke needed something more calculated, something that would hit him where it hurt the most, and leave no trace back to me. That's when the idea came to me. Financial fraud. Luke had always been the one to boast about his investments. Whether it was stocks, crypto, or some shady real estate deal, he was always bragging about how he was ahead of the game. He loved to feel like the smartest guy in the room, and that's exactly where he made his mistake. People like Luke get too comfortable. They think they can't be touched, that they've got everything figured out. Well, I was about to show him how wrong he was. The first step was to involve Ethan again. He had helped me with Max, but this time, I needed his skills in the digital world. Luke was smart about his finances, but Ethan was the kind of guy who could find a way in, no matter how careful someone was. One night, over a few beers, I laid out the plan. Ethan didn't hesitate for a second. He was in. We started by looking into Luke's online presence. LinkedIn, Facebook, all the usual places. Luke loved to talk, and it wasn't hard to find out where he was putting his money. He'd been talking about a few properties he had been flipping for profit along with some online investments, especially in a crypto exchange that he was convinced was the next big thing. There was a treasure trove of information to work with. The next step was to find his vulnerability. Luke had been in a few deals that skirted the edges of legality, but nothing so big that it would have gotten him in real trouble. I figured if we could create something that seemed legitimate enough, we could lure him in, and once he was hooked, he'd do the rest of the work for us. With Ethan's help, we created a fake investment opportunity. We set up a website for a non-existent startup that promised huge returns for early investors. We made it look slick, cutting-edge tech, big potential, all the buzzwords. We even populated the site with fake testimonials, dummy profiles on financial websites, and just enough hype to make it look legitimate. Then came the bait. I casually dropped the idea to Luke during one of our usual after-work hangouts. He was bragging about his latest crypto win, and I mentioned this new investment opportunity I'd stumbled upon. I played it cool, pretending I wasn't sure about it, but making sure he could see my hesitation. Luke's eyes lit up the moment I mentioned it. He couldn't resist. He thought he was smarter than me, that I didn't know what I was talking about. Over the next few days, I kept up the act, pretending I was unsure. Luke, he was completely hooked. He kept pushing for more details, asking about it every chance he got. Finally, I gave him the link to the fake site and told him to check it out himself. A week later, Luke was in. He threw in a hefty sum, enough to make a noticeable dent in his portfolio if things went south, but not enough to destroy him, at least not yet. The beauty of this whole plan was that once Luke was in, he'd do the work for us. He started pushing the investment to his contacts, trying to get them involved to build his position. That's how these scams work. The more people you pull in, the bigger your slice of the pie. Luke didn't even realize that he was digging himself deeper into the trap. Ethan and I waited until the time was right. A few months passed, and Luke had sunk even more money into the scam. He was starting to see returns, fake returns, of course, all fabricated to keep him hooked. And when the time finally came, we pulled the plug. The website went offline. The company vanished into thin air. Just like that, Luke's investment was gone. The fallout hit fast. Luke was furious. He called everyone he knew, scrambling to figure out what had happened. He pulled every string he could, reaching out to lawyers, trying to find something, anything, that would explain where his money went. But here's the thing. There was no trail. Everything had been wiped clean. The deeper he dug, the more he realized he'd been played. And there was nothing he could do about it. The worst part? He couldn't tell a soul. Luke had been scammed. And admitting that? Well, that would be admitting he wasn't the genius he thought he was. He couldn't stomach that. Over the next few weeks, I watched as his confidence completely shattered. He stopped talking about his investments. He didn't brag about his latest schemes anymore. He was quieter, more withdrawn, like he'd taken a punch to the gut and was still trying to catch his breath. I didn't need to confront him. I didn't need to rub his face in it. The loss itself was punishment enough. Luke had built his entire identity around being the guy who always came out on top, who always won. And now, he was just another sucker who got played. And the best part? He had no idea it was me who did it. As for Ethan, he wiped his hands clean of it once the job was done. We didn't need to discuss it anymore. We both knew what had to be done, and we did it. I got my revenge on Max and Luke, and the satisfaction of knowing they both paid for their betrayal. Was it enough? At that moment, yeah, it felt like it. But in the back of my mind, I knew there was still one person left, Sophia. After everything that happened with Max and Luke, you'd think the divorce would have been the final chapter. The end of a long, ugly saga of lies, betrayal, and revenge. But no, that shit dragged on far longer than I ever imagined. See, Sophia wasn't the type of woman to walk away quietly. No, she wasn't interested in splitting up and moving on. She wanted to bleed me dry in the process. At first, everything seemed like it was going to be straightforward. We agreed to sell the house, split the assets, and go our separate ways. But when it came to the money, Sophia started playing hardball. Specifically, she demanded an absurd amount of alimony. More than I could have expected, considering she had a job now. But that wasn't even the worst part. What really threw me was her demand for child support. She wanted me to pay for our son, but not just the standard amount. No, she wanted enough to live comfortably on for the next few years. The kind of money that would keep her in a lavish lifestyle, without her lifting a finger. For a while, I just accepted it. I loved the kid. I'd raised him. He was mine, in every way that mattered. So I thought, fine, I'll take the hit. I'll work double shifts for the next decade if that's what it takes. But then something started gnawing at me, especially after that damn joke about the neighbor's kid. That thought had been creeping around in the back of my mind ever since Sophia's face froze that night at dinner. And after everything that had come to light about her cheating, I couldn't ignore it any longer. So I did what I never thought I'd do. I asked for a DNA test. It was the last resort. Honestly, I didn't want to believe that the kid I'd raised for 8 years wasn't mine. But after everything Sophia had put me through, I had to know. Part of me felt like I was betraying him just by questioning it. But at the same time, I had to protect myself. I wasn't about to let Sophia take everything from me. Not if there was even a chance that she'd been lying about this too. The results came in a week later. I remember sitting in my lawyer's office, staring at the envelope like it was a ticking time bomb. When I finally opened it, I felt the floor drop out from under me. The test came back negative. The kid I had been calling my son for nearly a decade wasn't mine. I just sat there, holding that paper, unable to move. Anger? Sure, it was there. But more than anything, I felt hollow. Empty. Like everything I'd built with Sophia had been a lie from the start. She'd lied about who she was, about who I was, and worst of all, about who my son really was. It felt like the final, unforgivable blow, the one that cut deeper than all the others combined. This time, it wasn't just Sophia. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was everything. My lawyer? He was ready. He'd seen cases like mine before, and the next steps moved faster than I expected. The DNA test obliterated Sophia's case. Once the results came in, there was no way she could demand child support from me. She fought it, of course, but the judge wasn't having it. She tried every excuse in the book, telling him I was still the father because I'd raised him, that a test couldn't erase the years we spent together. But legally, it didn't matter. I wasn't on the hook for anything. Not one dime. The divorce dragged on for months after that. There were still assets to divide, things to settle, but Sophia had lost her leverage. The house was sold. I took my share and walked away. At that point, I didn't want anything more from her. I was done. Done with the lies. Done with the game. Done with everything that had destroyed my peace for so long. Once everything was settled, I packed up and moved far away, to a city where none of the chaos from my past could follow me. I didn't need reminders anymore. I needed space. Starting over wasn't easy. It was painful, but it was necessary. I found a new job. Nothing extraordinary, but enough to keep me busy and pay the bills. And with time, I built new routines. I made new friends. Slowly but surely, I started putting the pieces of my life back together. But it wasn't just about the physical move. It was about changing everything, about shedding the version of myself that had been caught in that toxic, suffocating world. The memories of Sophia and the betrayal, they stayed with me, but I refused to let them control me anymore. I wasn't the person I used to be, the man who had made that stupid joke blind to the storm in his own home. I'd learned from all of it. Maybe I was tougher, maybe a little colder, but I was wiser. I'd survived the worst of it and had come out the other side stronger than I thought I could be. And for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't in a long time: freedom. Update. It's been a while since I last posted. A lot has changed since then. If you've been following my journey, you know how brutal things got. Betrayal, divorce, and revenge seemed to take over every aspect of my life. But here's the thing. I'm finally in a place where I can breathe again. The past is still there, but it doesn't hold me anymore. After the divorce, after selling the house, I walked away from the city. It held too many painful memories, too much anger, and way too many ghosts. I needed to leave all of that behind. So I moved to a new city. Starting over wasn't easy. I won't lie, but it was necessary. The fresh start I needed. I found a new job. It's not anything glamorous, but it's enough. It pays the bills, keeps me focused, and gives me a sense of purpose. I've met new people, built new friendships, and created routines that feel like mine, really mine for the first time in a long time. The past still lingers. There are nights when it all comes rushing back, and I find myself wondering how I could have been so blind for so long. But those thoughts don't define me anymore. They're just echoes. I've learned to focus on the future instead of being trapped by the past, and that feels damn good. As for Sophia, we don't talk anymore. There's no reason to. The kid? It's complicated. I'm not his father, not in any legal or biological sense. But in my heart, there's still a part of me that cares about him. He didn't ask for any of this, but I had to step back for my own peace of mind. Maybe someday, when he's older, we'll talk again. But for now, I'm focusing on rebuilding my life. It's not just about surviving, it's about living. And I'm learning how to do that again. I want to take a moment to thank everyone who's been with me through this. Whether you've commented, messaged, or just read along, your support means more to me than words can say. When you're in the darkness, knowing you're not alone can make all the difference. It's been a long, brutal road, but I'm standing on the other side of it now. And I wouldn't have made it without people like you. Strangers who gave me hope when I couldn't find any myself. So what's next? I don't know. I'm taking it one day at a time. I'm staying present, trying to enjoy the little things, the things I'd forgotten to appreciate. I'm healthier now, mentally and physically, and that's something I'm proud of. To anyone going through their own struggles, remember this: you can make it through. It might seem impossible now, but I'm living proof that life moves forward. You'll heal, you'll grow, and you'll find peace. It takes time, but it's worth it. Thanks again to everyone who's stuck by me. I wish you all the best, happiness, strength, and success, wherever life takes you. Take care of yourselves and never stop fighting for the life you deserve.